Forced cancellation of official meeting shad sparked speculation in international media. Where is the Burkina Faso leader? Headlines dominated the front pages. Only 3 people knew the truth: Traoré, his private doctor, and a nurse working for French intelligence. When the diagnosis was made, the doctor had advised Traoré to rest. But true response was unexpected. No. If these are my final days, I will spend them executing a plan that will forever change Africa's future. The absence of Ibrahim Traoré from public view had reached its 11th day. In the marble halls of foreign ministries from Paris to Washington, intelligence analysts scrutinized satellite imagery of Burkina Faso's presidential palace, tracking movement patterns and visitor logs, searching for clues to explain the sudden disappearance of Africa's most influential young leader. Could be a coup, suggested a junior analyst at the CIA's Africa desk, presenting a time-lapse of vehicular activity at military installations surrounding Ouagadougou. No unusual troop movements countered his supervisor, and the cabinet is continuing routine functions. Whatever's happening, the government apparatus seems stable. In Paris, at the headquarters of the day, France Foreign Intelligence Service, a different theory was gaining traction. Mathilde Fournier, Deputy Director for West African Affairs, reviewed a secure transmission from an asset embedded in Burkina Faso's presidential medical staff. "We may have our answer," she told her team, eyes fixed on the encrypted mesh. "Our source indicates Traoré underwent extensive medical tests. 9 days ago, results were classified at the highest level, with access restricted to his personal physician. Dr. Urago. Medical crisis?" asked her chief of operations. Tournier nodded. "Potentially terminal, based on the security protocols active and the specialists consulted. If confirmed, this changes everything's her regional stability." She didn't verbalize. The obvious implication hang in the air: the potential power vacuum that would follow Traoré's incapacitation or death represented both risk and opportunity for French interests in their former colony. "Activate all assets in the region," she ordered. "I want confirmation on Traoré's condition." Within 24 hours, what neither the Americans nor the French yet realized was that Ibrahim Traoré was neither incapacitated nor preparing to relinquish power. Instead, locked away in the secure wing of the presidential palace with only his most trusted advisors, he was engaged in the most consequential work of his life, with a stopwatch ticking in the background. Marc Adrago approached the guarded door to Traoré's private study, medical file clutched tightly against his chest. The 2 presidential guards, members of the light red beret, personally loyal to Traoré, nodded in recognition, allowing him to pass without inspection. As the president's personal physician for 3 years, he had become a familiar presence, though the frequency of his visits in recent days had raised eyebrows even among the discreet security detail. Inside, he found Traoré not resting as advised, but standing before a massive map of Africa, colored pins marking locations across the continent. The president didn't turn as Ouagadougou entered, continuing his conversation with Defense Minister Sankara, Foreign Minister. "The meeting in Rwanda is confirmed," Traoré was saying. "President Lorenzo has agreed to our terms for the diamond processing agreement. That gives us 3 of the 5 partners we need." "Mr. President," interrupted Euro gently, "I have your latest result." Traoré finally turned, his face betraying no emotion as he dismissed his ministers with a subtle nod. When the door closed, leaving doctor and patient alone, Traoré gestured to a chair. "No improvement." "I assume?" he asked. His voice matter Overago shook his head. Opening the file, "The treatment isn't working as we'd hoped. The adrenal carcinoma is aggressive, and the metastasis to the liver is accelerating." He slid a Sirisoft scan. Images across the desk. These comparison images show the growth over just 7 days. Traoré studied the images dispassionately, as if reviewing infrastructure plans rather than evidence of his body's betrayal. Prognosis, the doctor hesitated. The professional detachment he'd maintained through decades of practice momentarily. Ibrahim Traoré wasn't just his patient. He represented hope for a new era in Burkina Faso's history. One where the nation's vast mineral wealth might finally benefit its people rather than foreign corporations. 6 months, he said finally. Perhaps 8 with aggressive vitriol, but that would signify your ability to function in your role. Traoré absorbed this information in silence, then returned to the map on Thruel. Then we have 6 months to ensure what we've started cannot be undone, sir, with proper rest and immediate treatment. Mark, Traoré interrupted. Using the doctor's first name, a new seal intimacy for the typical formal leader. We both know that Western hospitals would offer marginally better odds, perhaps a year instead of 6 months. But that would require leaving Burkina Faso, placing myself under foreign control, and abandoning the work that matters most. He traced a line on the map connecting several resource-rich African nations. This work reagunders Traoré's signature achievement that initiating the Pan-African Resource Sovereignty Initiative, an unprecedented coalition of mineral-rich nations, collectively negotiating with global powers rather than being played against each other. The framework agreements had been signed, but the implementation infrastructure remained vulnerable. Easy for foreign interest to dismantle if Traoré's guiding handicappered too soon. The medications prescribed will manage your pan and maintain your energy levels for now, the doctor said, accepting the decision. But the symptoms will become harder to cancel within 2 months. 3 at most, then we accelerate the timeline, Traoré said simply, and we maintain absolute secrecy about my condition. The vultures would circle immediately if they knew. What? Traoré didn't mention, and what Wario didn't need to be told, was that those vultures included not just political rivals within Burkina Faso, but powerful international interests who had been working to undermine Traoré's resource nationalism since his rise top hour. As the doctor packed his medical bag, Traoré asked, "Who else knows a boost diagnosis?" "Only myself and Nurse Dio, who assisted with the tests. She's been with the presidential medical team for 15 years, completely trustworthy." Traoré nodded, though a subtle shift in his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. Years in military intelligence had taught him that Varian had vulnerabilities. Every ANA had pressure points, and Western intelligence agencies were masters-eyed finding and exploiting them. "Thank you, doctor. Please return tomorrow with the treatment plan focused on maintaining my public functionality for as long as possible. Pain management is secondary renewal mental clarity." After Wadroge adapted, Traoré pressed a concealed button beneath his desk. Within moments, Colonel Amara Konate, his head of military intelligence, entered through a side door. "Have Nurse Dio placed under discreet surveillance." Traoré ordered without preamble. "Acconitor al communications, all contacts." Akana tenanted, asking no question. When head departed, Traoré returned to the continental map, studying it with renewed intensity. The disease ravaging his body had just transformed from a personal tragedy into a strategic variable, one that required adaptation rather than CERN. What he couldn't now was that his instincts about Nurse Dio were correct. 20 minutes after Dr. Wedriago's departure from the presidential palace, she slipped away during her break using a burner phone frame inside her apartment's bathroom, with the shower running to mask her conversation. As nighting, she whispered in French confirmation on Echo 1's condition. Terminal diagnosis: adrenal carcinoma metastasis estimated 6 to 8 months. In Paris, Mathilde Fourier received the intelligence with mixed emotion. As Acquerier DGSSE officer, she recognized the strategic opportunity presented by Traoré's impending incapacitation. Yet, as someone who had followed his trajectory from military officer to national leader, She held a grudging respect for what he'd accomplished. Understood. Nightingale continue monitoring and report any changes in treatment or condition. Priority information is who knows about the diagnosis and any succession planning. After ending the call, Fournier immediately contacted her superior within hours. The information of Boutreaux's terminal illness reached the highest levels of the French government, then spread through secure channels to key allies. Strategic planning sessions were hastily convened in Western capitals, focused on a single question: how to ensure that Traoré's resourcenationalism died with him. Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, a different kind of strategic planning was underway. Over the following days, Traoré maintained a punishing schedule, meeting with key ministers and military officials, often working through the night despite Dr. Arago's objection. The presidential security detail noticed their leaders' increased coffee consumption and theatric circles forming beneath his eyes, but attributed them to the intensity of his current project. 2 weeks after his diagnosis, Traoré convened a highly secure meeting in the underground facility beneath the presidential palace. The room was swept for surveillance device 3 times before the attendees arrived. The leaders of Mali, Niger, and Chad, fellow resourceric nations that had joined Burkina Faso's initiative along with ministers from South Africa and Angola. Gentlemen, Traoré began after security protocols were complete. Line has changed. The implementation phase for the Resource Sovereignty Initiative must be completed within 4 months, not the 18 we originally planned. President Goïds of Mali leaned forward. That's an extremely aggressive escalation. Ibrahim, the processing facilities, the financial lintasticroc, the securitoric stage. This took decades for Western powers to build these systems. We're trying to create African alternatives. In a fraction of that time, we don't have a choice, Traoré replied simply. He did not share his diagnosis. That information remained too sensitive, too likely to destabilize the coalition. But his tone conveyed the non-negotiable nature of the new timeline. For the next 6 hours, they restructured plans, reallocated resources, and committed to extraordinary measures. South Africa would fast-track construction of the processing facilities for strategic mineral. Angola would accelerate the banking infrastructure necessary to bypass Western financial systems. Mali, Niger, Chad, and Burkina Faso would integrate their security operations to protect the physical infrastructure from sabotage or military intervention. Meeting concluded. Gita pulled Traoré's side. Ibrahim, you've led this coalition brilliantly, but this acceleration, it concerns me. Not just practical challenges, but what it suggests about your confidence in the future. Traoré met his counterparts Gaz directly. The future belongs to the Suhu Act decisively in the present. My friend, the window for establishing African resource sovereignty is narrow. Western powers and their corporations are already mobilizing against us. We either move with unprecedented or we lose this opportunity for generations. After the African leaders departed, Colonel Kate approached Traoré with an update on nurse surveillance. Confirmed DGSC assets, sir. Encrypted communication to Paris, same day as your diagnosis. We've been feeding her controlled information since, nothing about today's meeting or the accelerated timeline. Traoré nodded unsurprised. Let her continue reporting me. Declining help. It will make them complacent, thinking they can simply wait for nature to accomplish what their economic warfare could not. The next phase of Traoré's plan involved a series of surprising diplomatic and economist initiatives that bewildered Western intelligence agents. Rather than consolidating power as expected of a leader, he appeared to bet deliberately, diffusing it. Institutional frameworks that could function without him. He created African Mineral Processing Authority, a transnational body with headquarters in Ouagadougou, but with operations and leadership distributed across participating nations. No single assassination or coup could decapitate. He established the Sankara Sovereign Wealth Fund, named for Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader. Thomas Sankara managed resource revenues with oversight mechanisms that required consensus from multiple nations, preventing any one leader from being bribed or coerced. Most significantly, he initiated the training for African resource management, rapidly identifying and developing young African experts in mining, engineering, finance, security, and diplomacy, creating the human infrastructure necessary for true resource independence. 3 months after his diagnosis, Traoré's physical decline came impossible to fully conceal. Public appearances were carefully managed, kept brief, with controlled lighting, and increasingly from seated positions. Ouedraogo's cocktail of medications maintained his mental acuity, but the weight loss and occasional tremors fueled rumors. Western intelligence agencies, believing these simply needed to wait for biological remove their problem, missed the significance of what was happening. They saw the institutional development as typical legacy building by a dying leader, not recognizing that Traoré was creating something unprecedented. A distributed system of African resource severity designed specifically to serve without him. For months after the diagnosis, with his condition deteriorating more rapidly than predicted, Traoré embarked on a secret divinal mission. With only Colonel Canadio Drago and a small security detail, he flew to a remote location in northern Burkina Faso, a newly constructed ashity built into the side of a mountain, its existence known to fewer than 20 people worldwide. "Welcome Tuthfault, Mr. President," said Doc. Amat Dio, lead scientist of the facility, has massive steel doors closed behind them. "We've prepared everything according to your specification." Thivo represented Traoré's most closely liquidated secret, a data fortress containing comprehensive intelligence on Western operations in Africa, geological surveys of the continent's mineral wealth, far more accurate than those shared with foreign companies. And most important, the complete technical specifications for processing strategic minerals. "Show me the cores," I requested. His voice weaker than monk's bear, but his eyes still sharp and folk. Dope led them to a secure chamber where 7 crystalline structures, each about the size of a basketball, glowed with faint blue light, suspended in specialized content fields. "Quantum storage cores," she explained, for the benefit of Colonel Kete and Dr. Edrag. Each contains the complete dataset encrypted with keys held by different African nations. No single country can access the full information alone. It requires consensus from at least 4 participating nations. Traoré approached the nearest core, studying it with evidence, satisfaction, and the distribution plan in progress. "Sir, 2 cores have already been secret litterants to secure locations in partner nations. The remaining 5 will be moved within the week." What Traoré had created was information sovereignty, atomic resource sovereignty, ensuring that the critical knowledge necessary for African nations to manage their own mineral wealth couldn't be monopolized, stolen, or destroyed. "How are ya feeling, sir?" Arago asked quietly, as they returned to the presidential elect. "Like a man racing against time," Traoré admitted, allowing a rare glimpse of his personal struggle. "But also, like a man who might win that race." 5 months after his diagnosis, with his body failing but his mind still razor-sharp, Traoré made his final public appearance. A speech at the inauguration of the African Mineral Processing Facility in Ouagadougou. Western intelligence agencies, which had been monitoring his declining health through Nurse Diallo and other sources, were surprised by the appearance, having estimated he would be bedridden by this stage. The facility represented the physical manifestation of his vision. Estatov, the processing plant for rare earth minerals and other strategic resources, eliminating the dependency on Western and Chinese processing that had long forced African nations to export raw materials at fractional values. Traoré arrived in a wheelchair, visibly thin, but dressed impeccably in a traditional Burkina outfit rather than his usual military attire. The symbol is lost on those present. He was appearing not as a military leader, but as a son of Africa. The audience, comprising leaders and representatives from across the continent, fell silent as was helped to the podium. He gripped its edges for support, surveying the crowd for a long moment before speaking. For too long, he began. His voice soft earthen, his usual commanding tone, but still carrying across the hushy gathering. Africa has been defined by has been taken from us. Our people, our dignity, our resources. Today we begin to define ourselves by what we have built. He gestured to the gleaming facility behind him. This is not simply a processing plant. It is a declaration of independence, not the paper independence granted by colonial powers, but the true economic independence that comes from controlling our own resource and their value chain. As he continued speaking, outlining the interconnecteds of resource management now operational across participating African nations, Western intelligence officers listening to the broadcast began to realize what had happened. What they had dismissed as the desperate legacy building of a dying man had been something far more strategic. A comprehensive system designed to outlive its creator. We stand at a pivotal moment in African history. True continued, his voice gaining strength despite his physical frailty. For generations, our vast mineral wealth has enriched others while our people remained in poverty. The laptops, smartphones, and electric vehicles transform the world contain Africa's cobalt, lithium, and rare earth metals. Yet the value and power remained elsewhere. His gaze swept across the assembly. That ends today, not through confrontation or isolation, but through taking our rightful place in the global value chain. Processing our own minerals, negotiating as equals. Not supplicants, building prosperity for our people rather than foreign sharehold. Ash concluded his address. Traoré redelivered the statement that would be quoted in international relations textbooks for decades to come. Africa's sources belong to Africans, not just hoes, living today, but generations yet, and what we have built cannot be dismantled by the loss of any individual. 'Tis now woven into the fabric of our nations, our institutions, our people's expectations. The path to true independence is irreversible. 3 weeks later, the official announcement came. President Ibrahim Traoré had died peacefully in his sleep after a private battle with cancer. He was 38 years. In capitals across the Western world, intelligence agencies and corporate boardrooms that had been waiting for this moment immediately mobilized their long-prepared plans to reassert control of our African resources. Financial incentives were offered to potential friendly successors. Economic pressure points were activated. Diplomatic entities were launched to help ensure stability during the transition. But something unexpected happened. These systems Traoré had built proved remarkably resilient. The distributed ladder structure of the African Mineral Processing Authority continued to function seamlessly. The Sankara Sovereign Wealth Fund maintained its independence from external pressure. Most importantly, they carefully selected and trained African experts in mining, finance, and diplomacy stepped into leadership roles across the continent, armed with both the technical knowledge and strategic vision to maintain the new paradigm. 6 months after Traoré's death, Mathilde Fournier found herself in a tense meeting at DGSSE headquarters in Paris. The director slammed his fist on the conference table. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "The architect is gone, yet the systems continue to function. Even 3 more countries have joined their source coalition this month alone." Fourier, who had been studying our strategy with growing professional admiration, offered her analysis. "We fundamentally misunderstood what he was building. So we thought he was constructing a personality-driven tin that would collapse without them. What he actually created was an institutional framework, specificality to survive his absence." She slid several documents across the table. intelligence reports from across Africa showing the continued consolidation of resource sovereignty initiative. Traoré knew he was dying. She continued, but rather than clinging to power or securing personal wealth like many leaders in his position, he used his remaining time to build something that could withstand his loss. He wasn't just racing against biological time. He was rusing against our expectation that his death would create an opportunity. The director studied the reports with a frown. So what you're saying is Traoré's final order to his doctor wasn't a Buddhist treatment. Fournier concluded it was about buying enough time to make his vision irreversible. And by all indications, he succeeded. 1 year after Ibrahim Traoré's death, leaders from 27 African nations gathered in Ouagadougou for the formal dedication of the Ibrahim Traoré Institute for African Resource Management, a training center for the next generation of African engineers and diplomats, specialized in protecting and developing the continent's natural resources. The keynote address was delivered by Dr. Marc Arago, who had resigned his medical position to lead institute, honoring the final request of his most significant patient. Ibrahimtraoré understood that true independence isn't declared in speeches or written in sentences, Ouedraogo told the assembled leaders and students. It is built in processing facilities, secured in data vaults, and most importantly cultivated in human mind. He gestured to young African students from across continent, the inaugural class of the Institute. When Traoré received his terminal diagnosis, he didn't see it as an ending. He saw it as a deadline, a clarifying force that concentrated his remaining energy on creating systems that couldn't be dismantled after his death. As the ceremony concluded, Madeleine Fournier watched from the back of the auditorium, having taken personal leave from the DGSS to it. In her long intelligence career, she had studied many African leaders, analyzing their vulnerabilities, their corruption, their potential to be influenced or controlled. Traoré had been different, a leader who turned his great testful ability, his limited remaining time, into his greatest strength. The most powerful lesson, she reflected, was not just in what Traoré had built, but in how Western intelligence agencies had misread him. They had seen a dying man constructing a legacy. What he had actually been building was a future, one designed specifically to continue without him. The strategic brilliance wasn't in defying death, but in ensuring that what mattered most would survive it. In his final months, facing the ultimate deadline, Ibrahim Traoré had transformed a terminal diagnosis from a personal tragedy into the catalyst for his continent's economic liberation. Perhaps the most extraordinary act of leadership in modern African history.